Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about the best recordings of Janáček's Glagolitic Mass. Now, this was one of those works that, you kind of stumble across in the course of your peregrinations through the discographic wilderness, and you think, what the hell is it? What is a Glagolitic? I mean, it's a mass. How interesting could it be? Who was Janáček anyway? And then you hear it, and you just go, "Whoa! This is amazing!" It's just an amazing piece of music. It's this eruptive, vibrant, vital choral. I mean, it should be as popular as Carmina Burana. I mean, it's much better music. It's an astonishing masterpiece of Janáček's late period, and it's not even really that religious, certainly ever, or sanctimonious. It's got just an unbelievable series of movements, beginning with an orchestral introduction. There may be two of them. Wait a minute for that. And then it ends with like an incredible exordium with four trumpets screaming and timpani pounding, preceded by an insane organ solo. And in between there are these choral movements where, without a single shred of actual counterpoint for the most part, he just creates these unbelievably dynamic textures. It's just an extraordinary experience. It really is. And for the most part, a surprising number of people have attempted to play it. Most of the best recordings are Czech, including Charles Mackerras, who might as well have been Czech. Some people did it. I mean, Dutoit did it. Bernstein did it. Michael Tilson Thomas did it quite well for Sony. But for the most part, the Eastern Europeans have a lock on the work. The reason I want to talk about it now, though, as a public service, especially, is because the Janáček people, whoever they are, have been doing a Bruckner on the Glagolitic Mass. It used to be life was so easy. There was Kubelik and there was Ancherl, and we were so happy. Then it turned out that the published edition is not the original edition, which was like maybe played once in Janáček's life, and then he revised it for publication. Well, they've gone back to the original edition and published both scores now, and here they are. The revised normal edition and the original edition. Now, what is the difference between the two of them? The differences are not enormous. Most of the time, the revisions are clearly superior. But let's talk about them, because Janáček was such an impractical composer. Some of the changes he made were just from the point of view of playability. The original piece ends and begins with something called an entrada. In the revision, it's only the ending. Why? Because there's an orchestral introduction right after the entrada. And quite frankly, it's stupid to have two orchestral introductions. You have an introduction to the introduction, then you play the first introduction at the end of the whole piece. It makes so much more sense just to play it once at the end, although it's stupid to call it an entrada, an entrance, if it's going to be at the end. Who cares? I mean, that's the way it was published, and it makes perfect sense, and everyone was completely happy with it. There's no point in playing it twice. If you want to hear it twice, go to the end, use your little remote, play it twice, knock yourself out. I think it's silly. Also, the orchestral introduction that follows is barred somewhat differently. The way that the measures are filled up with notes, it's a little quicker, a little different, but the music's the same, so it doesn't make any difference. Now, as far as the credo goes, I mean, everything is sort of normal until then. There is this sort of crucifixion scene, which Janáček rewrote substantially for the published version. The rewrite is extremely effective and very, very beautiful. The original version is it has a part for three timpanists, and it's gnarly and strange, and it's really not as effective. I mean, I get the point of what he was doing. He was trying to make it even more anguished and hysterical. It was a crucifixion after all. But The revision makes a lot more sense. It's tighter and more concise, and I think more dramatically effective. Then there are some changes in the sanctus. He made a couple cuts because the vocal ranges were kooky, and those are basically the difference. There's some small orchestrational difference. But then, that's not enough. It turns out that there is a version recorded by Czech conductor Thomas Netopil of the version of September 1927. This doesn't even exist. I mean, it's like saying it's the version of Tuesday. I mean, in the process of writing it, apparently he took a break in September 1927, and they play that version, which is not the same as the original version or the version that was revised and published, and it's just stupid. Why are people doing this? Everything that a great composer thinks is not equally important, and beyond that, composition is a process, and we don't need to hear every single stage along the way. All it does is show how bad some composers were until they finally figured out or got it right at the end, later on. I mean, it's crazy. I can accept having an original version because of the practicalities of performance of the day and the revised version, and you can take your pick. I mean, you know, we do that with like Mahler's Das Klagende Lied. It's okay. I can see that. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, these intermediate versions and all this stuff, it's just creating confusion and making people miserable. You know, I mean, it confuses the public. It exists more than for any other reason, I believe, financially, just to create copyrights, to keep things in print by making revisions and more revisions. And if you can do a new edition that has something different, that's even better, because that means you can claim to have the original version or the September 1927 version, not to be confused with the February 1928 version. I mean, when does it stop? Anyway, that's enough of my ranting. I know that I tend to go on about these things, but I think that they're so frustrating and there's such an injustice to the composer. Let's talk about records, okay? Let's make ourselves happy. Now, as I said, most performances of the Glagolitic Mass are, I mean, the best ones are by the Eastern European conductors. They seem to have the music in their blood, but there are exceptions to every rule. And the one exception that really comes to mind is Kempe. Kempe was, first of all, he was a colorist of genius. This is, with the Royal Philharmonic, is a somewhat heavy-handed performance. It's not as lean and mean as the Eastern European ones tend to be, but it's awfully good, and it's very well played and very well sung and exciting. And I mean, Kempe was just a joy to listen to most of the time because he was a chord guy. There was nobody who could balance and handle texture and color better than Kempe. So this is a really great performance, and it's one of the truly great performances that doesn't originate somewhere in Eastern Europe. Next, as I said, Anne Shirl. Totally awesome, a classic from the very, very beginning with extraordinarily fine choral singing. It's also not the quickest performance out there. Some of the other Czech conductors were a little bit, meaner and leaner, but wow, he has the music in his blood, and it's a stunning performance with the Czech Philharmonic. It's got all the right people doing all the right things. That's the bottom line, and it's coupled with a great Taras Bulba on this disc. Next, Kubelik. Now, this was, of course, done in Bavaria because he had fled Czechoslovakia at that point. This is a really fast, really exciting, no nonsense. Really, it's really just a pedal to the metal, ballsy performance with good soloists and just tons and tons of heart and guts. He diddles the orchestration in a couple places, not in any serious way. At the very end of the Credo, for example, when the final section begins, he has the bass trombones put in a good, to give the music some extra bottom, whereas Janáček just writes the strings going, it's a little odd. Anyway, fine performance, terrific sound, beautiful from the day one. It's been a classic, and this was the one that most of us would have learned the work from, if not the Kempe, because it was on a label that was available here readily. I mean, the Superfund recordings were hard to get, and that was basically all there was. Again, the Taurus bulba that comes with this is absolutely first rate, so it's definitely worth having. Then we get Macaris on Chandos. Now, there are two Macarises. This is the first one. I mean, this wasn't the first recording. This is actually his second one. But this one has the original version for the most part. Yes, it's the original version. And of the recordings of the original version, this is the best one. If you can find it, it's with Danish forces, but Macaris could make anybody do anything. I mean, he was a genius, and he entered fully into the idiom of whatever he was doing. And this was the first recording, I believe, of that edition. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still the best. Next. Now, here are some rather interesting ones. These are the three sort of recordings that I think are the best. And this one will be a real sleeper. This is the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra of Brno, which was Janáček's place, his town, his hangout, his place of origin and work, and where he originated most of his music. The conductor is Leos Swarovski, and the label is Arco Diva. This is an absolutely first-rate performance in every respect, as good as any of the others coming out of Czechoslovakia. It is exciting and brilliant and edgy in all the right places. Janáček is a composer who wrote deliberately rough-sounding music in places. You can't play it too smoothly. It has to be abrupt and eruptive and sharp-edged. And this performance cuts like a knife. It's just great in all the best ways. I don't mean in the bad way. The soloists are terrific. And it comes with a very, very interesting coupling. The cantata, The Eternal Gospel, which is very, very rare. I mean, so it's quite wonderful. It's the legend for soloist, choir, and orchestra. It's really nice to hear. So this is a very, very good disc, and I really recommend it very highly on Arco Diva. Finally, the two others. First, Antony Witt. I mean, the guy never puts a foot wrong in choral music. He is a brilliant, brilliant conductor, and he gets his Warsaw forces to play like crazy. This is a terrific series of recordings. He did two on Naxos of Janáček's music. This one comes with the Sinfonietta. Also, an absolutely first-class performance, as good as it comes. I'm serious, guys. You really should hear the way that he gets his chorus to sing, and the orchestra is just dazzling. I'm so impressed by these performances because I really didn't have high expectations for people outside of the Czech lands or Czech artists to do it so well. But Witt really nails it in every possible way, and I can't recommend highly enough these Naxos recordings with Witt doing Janáček's music generally. It's absolutely terrific. However, my favorite one, Macaris, but this one is with the Czech Philharmonic with great soloists. I mean, you've got Elizabeth Söderström as the soprano, and Richard Novak, the great Czech bass. This recording is a little bit tending towards the authenticity side because he restores a couple of high-lying passages in the Sanctus. But other than that, it's the published version. And it's absolutely great. It's also available it was reissued in a Macaris box on Superfund. If you can get this one, this is the Glagolitic Mass, the modern recording to have. It's a modern, really good digital recording with Czech forces at the top of their game. I mean, it's like Ancherl for the 21st century, if you know what I mean, even though it was made in the 20th. The point is, this is the best Glagolitic Mass out there, for my money. But any of the top 4 or 5 that I've pointed out will serve you very well. I mean, I only bothered to talk about, I think, the really good recordings, at least the ones I showed you here, because this is a piece where if it isn't going to be great, I mean, nothing stinks worse than the Glagolitic Mass when it's badly done. I mean, listen to Dutoit, listen to Bernstein, which is, I mean, it was great that he did it back then in the 60s, but boy, is it weird. I mean, it's just not right in so many ways. And the same thing is true of the Dutois. I mean, they try, they do their best, but they just don't have it. Tilson Thomas is worth a listen, but none of them compare to Anshel, Kubelik, Makaris, Swarovski, this new one on Arco Diva. And if you follow Kempa, you should have the Kempa just because you follow Kempa. Those are the great recordings of the Glagolitic Mass. So enjoy them all, and please don't get snookered by this version of 3:30 between, lunch and dinner. It's crazy. It's just crazy. Thank you, and keep on listening.